He was a newspaperman from Ohio. After a time in state politics, he was elected a U.S. Senator. He was a long shot for the Republican presidential nomination, but won it at a deadlock convention. He conducted a front porch campaign from his home in Marion, Ohio, promising a return to normalcy after the First World War. He easily won over his Democratic opponent, fellow Ohio newspaperman James Cox. He participated in the Washington Naval Conference, the first arms control conference in history. As time went on, his administration came to be dominated by Teapot Dome and other scandals involving cabinet members and other advisors. He undertook a Western tour the third summer of his presidency. In San Francisco, he died of a heart attack. He was buried at a memorial in his hometown of Marion. He is our nation's 29th chief executive, Warren G. Harding. Let's take a look at a map of Ohio and some sites associated with Warren G. Harding. Harding was born in Blooming Grove, Ohio, which is in north central Ohio, right about there. And there is a marker there at the location where he was born. He lived for many years in his hometown of Marion, Ohio. Marion is where he bought the newspaper, the Marion Star, and operated that newspaper for a long time. He got involved in state politics and was eventually elected U.S. Senator from Ohio in 1914. And it was there in Marion, at his home there, where he conducted his front porch campaign during the 1920 campaign from his house. So in Marion today, you can visit his house. There is construction underway on the Harding Presidential Center, and it is scheduled to open later this year, 2020. So there will be a big presidential museum as well as the home to see, and they're refurbishing the home. So when you see the photos in a moment, you'll see an artist's rendering of the Harding Presidential Center, but that is actually close to completion as of this recording. So in Marion, you can see the Harding Presidential Center, which includes the home, and you can also see the Harding Memorial, and that is where Harding was buried after he died in office in 1923. There's a memorial there that was dedicated by President Hoover. Let's take a look at one other map. Let's take a look at a map of the West Coast. In the summer of 1923, Harding went on a Western tour. He actually went all the way up to Alaska and then came down the West Coast. He was at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco when he died on August 2nd, 1923. Today in San Francisco, the Palace Hotel is still there. It is still a fully operating hotel, and you can even stay in the Presidential Suite, and that is the actual suite where the Hardings stayed and where Harding died. Now let's take a look at some photographs of these locations. Let's take a look at some books in my collection relating to Warren G. Harding and his life and times. I do have one biography of Harding. I don't know of any recent ones. This one was published in 1968. It's by Francis Russell, and it's called The Shadow of Blooming Grove, Warren G. Harding in his times. I do have a book that was published in 1996. It's by Robert H. Farrell, and it's called The Strange Deaths of President Harding. And it refers to not only the death of Harding at the Palace Hotel in San Francisco, which is documented in this book, but also the death of his reputation in the years that followed. It talks about the scandals that his administration was involved in, including the Teapot Dome scandal. It also raises the question of whether Harding was poisoned and lingering questions about the nature of his death in San Francisco, and the question of whether he fathered the child of Nan Britton. Nan Britton was a young teenager at the time that she first met Harding as a senator, and she wrote a tell-all book after Harding died, claiming that Harding was the father of her daughter. I should say that in the time since that book was written, it has been conclusively proven through DNA evidence that Warren Harding was the father of Nan Britton's child. I do have a very interesting biography of Florence Harding. It's called Florence Harding, The First Lady, the Jazz Age, and the Death of America's Most Scandalous President. It's by Carl Sferrazza Anthony, and it was published in 1998. A nice big book that really covers Florence Harding's life. She was actually married briefly before she married Harding. She was divorced, the first lady to be divorced, and it, of course, covers her life with Warren Harding in Washington. It covers Harding's affair with Carey Phillips, as well as the other controversies in the Harding administration, Harding's strange death, and what Florence Harding's role in that whole situation may or may not have been. And Florence Harding dies the following year in 1924. Here's another book published in 1960 by John Hicks. It's called Republican Ascendancy, 1921 to 1923. It is an overview of the politics and policy during the administration of Warren Harding and his two successors, Calvin Coolidge and Herbert Hoover. And lastly, a good book on 1920s culture. It's called Flapper, a madcap story of sex, style, celebrity, and the women who made America modern. It was published in 2006. It's by Joshua Zeitz, and it covers individuals like Coco Chanel and Zelda Fitzgerald. Quite an interesting book. Our next program will cover our nation's 30th president, Calvin Coolidge.